Welcome back to another live with Esoteric Nexus.
Hello.
We were running late today, and that is okay because we are working on nailing down a place today for now. Until we find another place, we're doing it
Right near
Braden's Casa. So, even though we're like a half hour late,
I got you.
I'm so glad that you guys are here with us because this is a juicy topic. I am super passionate about communicating and clear communication. So tonight we're going to talk about turning conflict into connection.
Connection into conflict. I just felt the need to say it. I don't know. Don't ask me. It just came out. I couldn't stop it.
Conflict is neutral until you start to handle it. You can start handling the conflict and building a connection. So each time you encounter conflict, it creates a connection. And that's what we're always going for. The goal is to feel heard and understood, to be heard and feel understood. So, how does conflict happen? Conflict happens when we focus on the symptom and not the root issue. And it makes us feel unheard. And that causes fights and disconnection.
Miscommunication.
Miscommunication.
Misunderstanding. Mishearing. Miss everything.
Feeling unheard. Yes.
Well, and no, I don't have anything. Keep going.
You can have repetitive conflict that happens over and over, and the conflict arises because you are handling 20 plus issues at a time instead of just the one, because the first one wasn't handled. You could have serious conflict if you are unhealthy conflict if you are focused on me versus you. If it's got to be about winning the fight, then.
And remember, guys, like that one's super subconscious. Like any and every conflict that we have, we start out with the desire to be understood as well as, to some degree, understand the other, right? But when differing opinions start taking place and they are being said to each other, you immediately go into the mindset of you're not understanding me, and you think that you're trying to get your point across through understanding, but really you're trying to be right. Like that's part of trying to be heard. And I'm not saying that if you're trying to be heard that you're trying to be right, and that's not how you go about it. But it's such a fine balance between the two. Like they're just so close together, trying to be right as well as trying to be understood, that when you start getting frustrated and you start getting angry and you want to lash out, that moment is when you got to ask yourself, am I talking to understand or am I talking to make a point? And am I listening to understand or am I listening so I can still make my point? So
Those are really good points. Really good points. One of the last ways that I've got here for how conflict arises is unregulated emotions. If we have not learned how to regulate our emotions, then we can lash out and then it becomes a problem. And it takes two to fight. It also takes two to heal. Healthy conflict can lead to growth. Conflict is unavoidable. It comes up everywhere. But if we can do it in a healthy way, then it can lead to growth, so much growth. Conflict is necessary for growth.
confrontation is an invitation to conversation.
What else do I got here? One note that I have for how to initiate healthy conflict, or
I would go with that.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Conflict, there's a lot of words that have taken
negative connotations.
Oh, baby girl, I can't. Not right now. I told you.
One note that I have is to set up a code word or a code phrase. So one thing that I saw on Facebook that was really awesome and I am trying to incorporate into my life is asking if you have 8 seconds. And that's one way you can let a friend know that you really need someone to talk to right now. Do you have 8 seconds? It just 8 seconds to let somebody know that you're there for them and create space for them. If you have an issue that you need to bring up to your partner or to a friend, and you need a safe space created so that they understand that you are looking for understanding. Everybody goes for the phrase, we need to talk. That can really bring up some defensive emotion. Like, you did something wrong. We need to talk. If you have a good phrase for that, like, babe, oh gosh, I don't even have a good one right now.
I do. A conversation needs to be had because we are not meeting in the middle. It's as simple as that. Because then he's going to immediately, or she, what do you mean by that? And then boom, you're in it. And you get to set the tone for the conversation, right? And you started out with saying, I need to have a conversation with you.
I need to reach a deeper understanding with you.
Maybe. Sometimes you don't need to reach a deeper understanding. Sometimes you really just don't understand, period. Like, even on a surface level. And
I'm looking for some clarity on a situation. If it happens to be about a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So Jimmy Knowles, I remembered his name.
Jimmy
Knowles is a wonderful counselor. I see him all the time on TikTok. He's on YouTube. He has 7 steps to turn conflict into connection. And that's what we're going off of today. I think they're wonderful. And oh gosh, I love communication. So number 1 for turning conflict into connection is to create a space of appreciation and affection. If you have appreciation and affection, then you have intimacy. When you're not feeling appreciated, when you feel like there's lacking affection, you don't feel as intimate with your friend, your partner, whoever it is.
I could agree with that.
And you could ask yourself, why do you stop doing the little things? In the beginning of a relationship, in the beginning of a friendship, you're going out of the way to be understanding, to show up for that person. You stop doing the little things after so long. You notice it. And I find that I have to be more diligent and intentional about continuing to date my partner, continuing to show up for my friends. I kind of acknowledge, or I get a feeling in the back of my head that, it's been a while since I talked to so-and-so. I should probably reach out and let him know that I'm still thinking about him, that I still care. I personally value friendships where you can have that time and you don't have to worry about it so long. Relationships that don't require so much.
Yeah, you can pick up where you leave off, whether it be 3 months, 2 months, 2 weeks.
But that comes with some understanding. As a parent, when in a marriage, life is pretty hectic.
I think it kind of like, when you are true to yourself and you're not trying to do things to like, I'm gonna say it, when you're not trying to manipulate the look of what others see you as. We are willing, and it falls into people pleasing. It falls into the codependency, and like, those are extreme examples of it. But literally, like, when you show up for yourself and you are choosing to, whether it's to reach out or to maybe just kind of be scarce, whether you decide to give them a full-on explanation or leave it at a few words and come back to it at a later date, like, as you set those boundaries, make those decisions for yourself, you're going to find those friends that really fall into that category of being understanding with where you're at, and vice versa, So if you find that you have friends that you feel the need to do that for, start with them. It's good practice. You can even give them a heads up. Be like, hey, this is kind of where I am noticing, like, I feel like anxious when I see your phone call and I want to talk to you, but it takes a lot out of me and I really don't know why. And boom,
absolutely,
there's your conversation starter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at that! I brought it back. Boom, yeah. Go me.
You want to create a space where you both feel seen and understood. The respect and the love, you know? If it doesn't feel like that, then you're going to feel less inclined to show up in that space. And leading on to that, you know, creating a safe place to be honest is really imperative. That's step 2. Step 1 is creating a space of appreciation and affection. Step 2 is creating a safe place to be honest. And as we go over all these steps, these are created over time. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a couple days. It might take a lot of practice. It might take you 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but keep working at it. And if it's not working for you, then you know that you need to maybe remove yourself from the situation for a while, or look at other steps
I will also
that you might need to take.
On that note, no, wait, no, I don't think it's time to be said yet, but I got a good part that kind of leads into that whole being honest and whatnot with what it is you're saying. Creating that safe space though, that's not something I really thought about. You know, like I'm willing to have a conversation anywhere, and like maybe the car isn't the best place for that while somebody's driving and you're making them possibly feel attacked, or you know, like maybe the house should be cleaned before you have a conversation like that because there's distracting things otherwise. There's like
on that same note, think about what you need to feel safe, to bring up you know, honest feelings, to be vulnerable. What kind of space do you need? There's a really good quote by John Gottman, and he says, marriages die in the conversations that never happen.
Truth.
If you don't feel like you can bring up certain things to your friend, to your partner, to your spouse, that needs to be talked about. That could be the start of a conflict that you turn into a connection, because you are seeking connection with this with people, with these people that you're talking to.
And if not a connection, a resolution. But either which way, it's not the same chaos that you put yourself through, right? Because I mean, that is the definition of eternity, doing the same thing over. Which I would like to switch around a little bit to say, choosing not to approach something that you know needs approaching over and over and over again, thinking that one day it will change, it'll go away, it'll be done, or I'll get used to it. Like that is very much like an insane thought when you put it in that perspective.
Right. So what do we need for a safe place to be honest? We, both of you, need to agree that we're not going to use criticism. We're not going to use blame. We're not going to shame. We're not going to yell. We're not going to be passive aggressive. If we can agree to those things before we continue forward. Boundaries, you know, what boundaries do you need in place? And boundaries is one of the things that we're going to touch on as well.
You need to have a safe word. A silly safe word is best, but a safe word nonetheless. When your agreed upon boundaries that you just set before the conversation starts can be put in place. Because here's the thing. Like, we can all day long say, I'm going to treat you with respect during this conversation. I'm not going to criticize. A safe word or a phrase. Something. But, you know, at the end of the day, we are learning how to communicate. And everybody thinks that they know how to communicate really well. And, you know, it's not really always true. And if you are one of the few that have already got it down, go you. I envy you. But in the heat of the moment, when things get heated, when they will, especially in the early stages of jumping into conversation, you are going to fall to the criticism. You're going to fall to breaking those agreed upon things. Like, those things are agreed upon because they're sensitive and they are things that are triggering to both of you, right? So if you're angry, it's so easy to just go ahead and trigger them on one side or the other. That safe word allows you the momentary mental reset.
A reminder.
Yeah.
I just did it.
Yeah, we just
we're practicing these. Mm-hmm. We're trying to stop these bad habits that we have. They come from a place of hurt from the past, you know, when you've been vulnerable, when you were trying to have good communication with someone. We have this fear.
And the beauty of the safe word is when the boundary is breached, you're not accusing them, saying you're breaking the boundary that we set. Now we are already getting into the accusatory. Now it's just full blown, and then feelings are hurt, and then it escalates. But that safe word, it's showing somebody that a boundary was crossed without directly pointing it out. So then you're not feeling called out. It's just a reminder. Oh, that's right. We did have these in place.
It might even have to start and end for the day with creating a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we might have this big conflict with someone and we're struggling to communicate. So starting to create a safe place, reminding your partner, this other friend or whatever, that you want to feel understood and seen, and you want to understand them and you want to hear them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having this conversation at all. We would just go to, separating.
Call it quits. Be done. Goodbye. Hasta luego.
Creating intentional appreciation can help you create a safe place to let your partner know or your friend know that you care, that you are, you're trying, you're opening up.
You're not here to like bash on them, beat on them, and tell them what they're doing wrong.
You got to practice being vulnerable.
I see a kink in the road and we need to fix it. Help me, please. I've got the tools. Do you have the know-how? Or maybe I have the know-how, but I don't have the tools.
You got to practice being vulnerable. If you can be the first one to take the first step, then you can set the stage. I am opening up. I'm pouring out, and this is how I feel. And I don't think that you purposely are making me feel this way. So I'm trying to reach an understanding.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That sets a whole different tone than it would if you never do this. You always do that. Start with vulnerability. A safe place. I am trying to create a safe place. I'm being vulnerable right now. And if I feel safe enough to be vulnerable, would you? So step 3 is identifying actual feelings and needs. It's really hard for a lot of us to understand and identify what we're feeling. And I have a beautiful little chart ready for some feelings.
Ooh.
Anger can show up in different ways. You can see the face of anger. I'm angry, and it can be underneath hurt and betrayal. But how do you get to that point if you don't start checking in with yourself?
Yep. And you can't just accept the first answer you give yourself. Like the first answer that you give yourself is the first answer to the next question you got to ask yourself. It's always going to be layered. Very seldomly are you going to step into something, have a thought about what the emotion is, and know right off the bat exactly where it stems from, what it is it actual anger, so on and so forth.
You never come home on your lunch breaks. You never do this and that. You always leave me. You're always on your phone. That can be an anxious attachment that comes out really hurtful. That's not what we're trying to do when we're having conflict. But if you dissect that a little bit and think about that in yourself and check in with yourself, you can understand that underneath that, you're probably feeling kind of lonely if they're never showing up at these times and they're always making you feel like this.
Maybe even a little bit of jealousy.
Maybe you're scared. Maybe you're scared that they believe that they don't want to spend time with you. I'm scared you don't want to spend time with me. I feel lonely. Identifying those feelings, listing off the feelings. You got anger. What are angry feelings? Jealousy, being annoyed, mad, irritated, frustrated.
Resentment. Grudges.
Yeah.
I guess grudging is more of like a perpetuated anger.
Still, it would fall under the umbrella of angry.
Right.
What are some sad emotions, feelings that you could have? You could feel ashamed. You could feel unloved. You could feel lonely.
Stephanie said that.
Maybe guilty, a little bit of isolated, feeling dismissed, What about scared? I've got a bunch for scared, you know? It could
Scared.
you could feel really anxious, insecure, confused. If you used words like that instead of you never this and you always do that, I'm feeling insecure, confused, rejected, helpless, super submissive, discouraged, inadequate, embarrassed, feeling overwhelmed.
I'd like to add passive to that list. When you are facing something that you don't want to face, more often than not, you'd like to just push it off, ignore it, be passive with it, not be aggressive and handle it, and like, you know, perpetuates that guilt, ashamedness going on through that. You know, also with sadness or with fear. I don't know why I said sad. Anyway, fear and love go hand in hand. They are another pair of feelings that are felt in a very similar manner. And there are oftentimes in our parenting choices or parenting choices that we have experienced from our parents where, you know, they choose to do something and they say that they're deciding to do it out of a place of love because they love you, they care about you. They don't want you to end up hurt. They don't want you to feel, you know, we don't want our kids to go through what we go through. And like, we figured it out. Please just listen. You know, and then they don't because they got to figure it out the hard way. But really remembering to ask yourself if what you are doing, or, well, yeah, we'll keep it on that train. If what you are doing is out of love or is it out of fear?
Is it coming from a place of fear or resentment?
Well, because, you know, like, your kid could ask you to go do something and it might be something that is something you don't think is in their best interest. You know, maybe you're worried about them breaking a leg in tournaments at karate, or, you know, maybe you think that the stigma of what ballet people go through, ballerinas go through on their rigorous training exercise schedule is something that you don't want to expose your kids to. But and you justify it with love, and you're like, I'm doing this because I love my kids, because I don't want them to have to go through all that. But also, you're doing it because you're scared that they're going to experience these things, and we don't know how anything's going to turn out until it turns out that way. And we've got to allow for our kids to be able to, like, live and experience and do life. And then I think that kind of falls into, like, with our partners, you know, as you have partners, and there are a lot of things that you will reach out and do from a place that you feel is love, and it's actually fear, you know, and then you justify it with love because, you know, like, you can hide behind that. You can be like, oh, it's love, that's why I'm doing it, it's love. Why don't you get it? Like, don't you love me? Because I love you, and that's why I'm doing this.
Conflict can arise from hurt feelings and unmet needs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Indubitably.
What are some basic needs? What are some needs that we would have in friendships, relationships? You know, respect, safety,
Communication,
autonomy in choosing our dreams and our plans, celebrating life and dreams and losses and deaths, interdependence, acceptance, appreciation, closeness, empathy, physical nurturing,
love,
food,
validation,
sexual expression, touch, to play, laugh, have fun, spiritual connection. Some basic needs, you know, they can, if they're feeling unmet, then you're gonna feel less connection, less acceptance, less
desire to do the things you used to want to do or did early on in that connection phase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that really boils down to like patience being worn thin, you know, like,
Yeah.
when you try, because you do, at some point, on some level, you try to have a conversation with somebody, whether it's your significant other
or you're brushing stuff off and you just brush so much stuff off. I truly believe that you teach people how to treat you by what you allow and you don't allow. So if you keep letting some of your your needs get sloughed off because, you'll make up your own excuse why it doesn't happen. And
then you fall victim to that. You know, also, when it comes to having these conversations, the biggest way you can step forward in any and all and every conversation, if you guys find that you're at an impasse, it's because one or the other is not taking the time to understand where the other's at. They're already setting up trigger points in their head for the next thought, the next rebuttal, the next whatever. And if you live a life with the thought process that you will always be the one to understand somebody first, you have a lot less misses with your conflict resolution. Because once you can understand somebody and you understand where they are at, then you know how to move forward. You have reached their level of understanding, comprehension, and then you can move forward with it. Then you know the words that you need to say because you're like, this is how this person thinks. This is what's going on. This is his perception. I know how to say it in a way where it meets that whole requirement. And then boom, and then there's that connection, and then all of a sudden they are on your level, and then they'll understand where you're at with what you're saying. And because they already feel validated, they're totally right there with you to try and figure out your validation.
Right, we got to remember we're on the same team. Mm-hmm. We have this connection we did have this connection with this person because we're on the same team.
And because you care, right? Like you're having these conversations, you're making these changes, you're choosing to do these things because you care. If you didn't care about the relationships you have, you wouldn't have any relationships.
If we want to feel closeness, we need to understand what they need to feel loved and valued. Remember why you're having this conflict. Why am I fighting? What am I fighting for in this conflict? What are they fighting for in this conflict? We're trying to reach an understanding.
And then recognizing when the conversation has been overreached, the moment somebody starts getting angry or irritated, they're shutting down. And from that moment, you've got one of two choices. It's either time to shut up and let them talk and try to understand their point, or it's time to shelf the conversation, allow yourself to sit down and sit with what just happened. And you can ask yourself why and all those other things, and then, reconvene on that same conversation at a later time. Give yourself a day, give yourself 3 days.
You got to remember, we can't control how other people react or respond. We can only control ourselves.
And we can't control the situations that we're in. We can. We get the choice. Sorry, we get the choice for all of the experiences that we're in, but we don't get to control the process. We're here for the process. You get to make adjustments to the process, but if you have a process in your head and that's how it's going to go, very seldomly will it work because you're too rigid. You're not willing to open up and get bendy with it, and then the conversation breaks down. Gotta be like a piece of bamboo you can bend in the wind, or you snap.
Step 4, learning how to express yourself with respectful vulnerability.
What does that mean?
So I have examples.
Cool. I need examples.
Like a bad example is, you never do this, you always do that. That's not how we're practicing vulnerability. So if we're trying to go like, when this happened, I'm feeling XYZ. Or when that didn't happen, I'm feeling XYZ. We are expressing with our feelings, not accusatory statements. We're not trying to bring shame. We're not pointing fingers. We're expressing the story. This is the story I'm telling myself. We're having this conflict because there's a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, or needs being unmet, and I'm trying to reach that understanding. So when this happened, I'm feeling this way. you're exposing the hidden needs and feelings that they need to understand.
And you got to step away from using words like every time or always or what's another one? I don't know. Anything that puts it into a perspective that they have never done anything different in their entire life. And if it really is that way, I mean, then do it. But it's like it's going to create.
We want to stay away from accusations. Lead with the most generous assumption possible. You know, it sounds like you're feeling like this. Can we talk about that? We're validating each other's feelings. You know, would it make you want to open up and be vulnerable if it came out like, you never want to spend time with me, this always happens?
Oh, yeah,
as opposed to, I'm feeling scared that you don't want to spend time with me. I'm feeling lonely and unloved. And then you empathize with what they're feeling.
But what if they just?
Well, you can't control how other people
emotions.
Respond.
No, you can't. But how would you respond to that? Because sometimes that's the hang-up. You try to get vulnerable with somebody, and then they're like, absolutely fucking not. I'm just going to turn this into an absolute like.
Okay, so that's actually step number 5. Like validating the other's feelings, even if you don't agree with them. This is a huge hang-up for me because my last marriage was when I there was not a safe place to bring up honest feelings, because when I would bring up my feelings, he made it a point to convince me that I shouldn't feel that way, or to convince me that that's not how I actually feel.
What if they like blow you off and just don't want to have the conversation? Like, where do you go from there?
The person might not respond well. That's just how it is. And you know, this doesn't happen overnight. If this person isn't listening to you and understanding you, then it's up to you to make your own decisions on how to move forward with that.
That's true.
But personally, in relationships, if we don't have the feelings and needs met, then it's not a healthy relationship for us to be in.
And there's no respect there.
There's no respect. It's my opinion that we shouldn't have connections like that. It's not conducive to having a healthy life. And we are all looking for a more peaceful way to live. We want peace in our life. We want to feel connected with people and passion in our life, you know? That's just that at the end of the day, we want to feel heard and understood. We are craving to be heard and understood. That's the point of communication.
And that's where we all get into trouble.
Vulnerability is scary. Past experiences really dictate how people respond in situations like this. It took a lot for me, from my past marriage and my feelings constantly being invalidated. I'm told that my feelings aren't real. It made it hard to connect with him. We couldn't move past anything because any issue that arose, I didn't feel safe enough to have conversations. You know, marriages die and the conversation's not had. It's true. There was nothing there because the conversations couldn't be had. There was no resolution. And we're trying to avoid that in all relationships, friendships, connections that we have. So if we can create that space, then we are welcoming friendships and connections and experiences that also respect us.
What phrase is not true? What phrase is not true? Close. Almost got my name right.
So learning how to express respectful vulnerability, to respectfully express it, also teaches the other people that you engage with how to express themselves vulnerably. If we go into step 5 and validate other people's feelings, validation is acknowledging their feelings and experience is real and important to you. If you can create that, you're teaching them how to create that for you. You're teaching them how to create that for you. If you lead by example If you remember this in conflicts and you take it into all the other conflicts that you have, whether it be work, friends, spouse, whatever it is, if you remember these things about conflict, then you can create this healthy connection with other people. If you're validating them, teach them to validate you. That could be one of the things that you set up when you talk about boundaries. You know, it is not our job. It is not our job to convince them that they should not have those feelings. Don't be like my ex. It is not our job to convince them that they shouldn't feel that way. It is our job to challenge our own feelings, our thoughts, but not theirs. Why am I feeling this way? Is that really what it is? Is that really the feeling it is? As we're identifying feelings, that's for us to do, not to do to them.
And if they don't want you to feel that way, there are things that they need to do to show you that you don't need to feel that way.
How did that make me feel with my ex-husband? Disconnected, unheard, unappreciated, dismissed. This leads to disconnection in relationships. It pushes them away. It's not about finding the perfect words. It's about the energy behind them.
And remember, we all want to be validated and we all want to be understood. So the sooner that you learn to understand others first is the sooner you get to be understood first.
Summarize it back to them. So that they feel that's a way that you can make them feel validated, is you summarize it back to them, and that gives you a better understanding. And don't interrupt. That's hard for me, and it's a pet peeve of mine. So why would I do that to other people if I don't appreciate it?
I definitely interrupt. If there's something that I'm not understanding in what they're saying, I cut them off and I say, all right, I want to address this real quick, and then we can move forward. Unless they're like in a passionate spiel. If they're in a passionate spiel, I'm gonna just hold it in my head and wait for them to like get it all out. But if we're just like back and forth talking, trying to get stuff figured out, like
reminder, we're absolutely not validating accusations. We are not validating accusations. We're not pointing fingers and saying, yes, they're right. That's not what we're doing. You're right, I'm wrong. These are feelings. I'm feeling. Back to identifying feelings. Just say that. Like, nothing feels safer to people than when they have the courage to say something vulnerable and be welcomed with understanding and love.
But the beauty in this is when we get good at this, there's going to be a lot of your right moments. And it'll be on both sides. And because it's healthy communication, you both will be humble enough to say it to the other when it's appropriate, So these 7 steps are daunting, but at the end of it is a very beautiful reward that allows for peace of mind and happy,
feeling understood life. And connected. I love you too, Steph. Boundaries is number 6. Boundaries are standards and your needs. And no contact and avoiding someone is a boundary. Going no contact with someone is a boundary. So if they are not respecting you and they are not seeking that connection and understanding with you, going no contact is okay. That is a boundary.
Boundaries.
Some of the boundaries that we can set come in the form of communication boundaries, the words that we're using, the tone. What are some boundaries that you can set? These are boundaries that you can set at the beginning of the conversation before.
Isn't it just unfortunate that everything that we've got to do to grow requires boundaries?
Boundaries are important.
And they're so flippin' hard.
Communication, understanding, feeling heard. Guys, boundaries are for you. They are for you. They are not for any freaking one else. Boundaries are the best way that we can show up for other people. If my boundaries are being crossed, I'm going to have to react a certain way. I'm going to come out defensive because my boundaries are crossed. You get the best version of me if all my boundaries are respected and appreciated and loved and all that good stuff. You get the best me. I want to bring the best me forward.
Do you give them a
You gotta
shitty you
respect
if they
my boundaries.
don't?
Huh?
Do you give them a shitty you if they don't? Or is it like,
I have been practicing love. You know what? I just remove
practicing
myself
love.
from the situation. I try not to put myself in situations. I try to
That's fair.
use my filter to judge whether or not I should even go there.
How muddy?
Past experiences. Yes, learn. Emotional boundaries that you can set up. We're not manipulating each other's feelings. We're not throwing people under the bus or trying to use things against them or use the vulnerability that they bring up against them in future conflicts,
Mm-hmm.
Emotional boundaries that we set in place. And
Stephanie, as you place your boundaries, you will find those that do and do not respect them. And then it's up to you to choose, like, how much does that boundary matter?
You could use boundaries as a way to filter who you keep around, who does respect your boundaries. I'll keep those people around.
But also remembering that there are going to be people that may step on boundaries, may cross them to some degree, and they may not be very big boundaries as far as like what's super important to you. But the rest of them is really good. So it's learning also how to balance out what kind of time. Like, so there are some people that I can hang out with at any given time because they're awesome. And then there are some people that are more situational. Like they either eat up a lot of my energy or they try to take advantage of the help that I can give, whether that's physical or otherwise. And so like I'm still willing to barter out some of my time because they're good friends. They're still growing, they're still doing their things. This is just one aspect of them that doesn't really jive with my life, so I limit it. So it doesn't mean you've got to completely cut everybody out of your life that doesn't follow every boundary that you set. But it's definitely, you now have more freedom to choose better friends in the categories you need them to be better in.
Or use it as a way to respond appropriately.
Yeah, I like that better.
Another boundary for conflict is sticking to one topic, keeping on topic. We're not going to bring up 20 things at a time. We're going to bring up what the issue is, why we're bringing up the conflict, or that the conflict is about that specific topic that they want to list a bunch of things on. It's just that chunk.
And if the other person you're in that conversation with wants to go off topic in defense of what you just talked to them about, let them acknowledge it and then go back to your points. Go back to the topic at hand. It's okay that people get off topic, but when you accuse them of being off topic, they're going to feel not validated, misheard, not understood, and in their head, they're like, I'm giving you a reason as to why I did what I did, and you're like, let them spit it out. Let them say that reason. It may spark something. You can be like, oh yeah, no, you're totally, wow, I get that, and maybe not. And then you can carry on. You'd be like, yeah, I recognize what you're saying. You're not wrong, but
these are ideas. So if you're going into conflict with somebody who has the tendency to bring up 30 things at a time instead of sticking to one, that's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Another kind of boundary that you could set up is physical. This was a big one for me. I've encountered people where when we get into conflict, there's a lot of aggressive hand gestures, physical space, personal space during conflict could be a big one. A physical kind of boundary. Creating boundaries. We have talked many a time about boundaries. Setting boundaries is important. My last and final how to turn conflict into connection is accountability. Accountability, guys. Ugh. Take responsibility for how you used to show up in hurtful ways. Both parties. You know what? It makes sense why you used to jump to defensiveness in the past. I wasn't very vulnerable and I was using criticism and blame. I bet that made you feel attacked. and unappreciated. Take accountability for your part. It helps rebuild trust. It helps give confidence to them to bring things to you in the future, to have a healthy conflict that leads to connection with you. You know, if you can accept be accountable for the things that you did,
You know,
and come to a mutual agreement.
you know what's awesome about being accountable to everything you did? Nobody can point the finger at you.
If
Nobody.
you're the one doing it.
Well, and like people just, I mean, if you're taking accountability for all your shit, you're being open with it, you're saying, oh, you're right, I dropped the ball there. Oh, you know what, man? I really tried to make this happen, but X, Y, and Z happened. I apologize. What can I do to make it better? Whatever. If you are always that person in any circumstance, even the hard ones, then they are never, ever, ever going to have the opportunity to be like, well, you did this, and you did that, and you didn't answer for that. Like, we addressed that. We addressed that when I did it. And by taking on that accountability, you are creating, or rather setting the tone for your significant other to do the same. For your significant other to be comfortable when you come to talk to them about the conflict you're having with them, because you're already showing what accountability looks like. They're so used to seeing it that they can't help but gravitate towards that.
If we are putting these practices, if we are putting these practices into play ourselves when we encounter conflict, my gosh, we can really lose all that fear that we have for conflict. Conflict is scary. I still fear conflict. It's something I've been working on. Conflict can be scary with other people, but when it comes to personal relationships, man, I get nervous. I get real nervous.
You know,
I had that conversation with my little sister, and my goodness, dude, there was so much practice that I was putting into play that it felt like we were going circles and circles, but I was putting into practice the things that I learned. You know, I feel like you're saying these things and it feels kind of mean, but I don't think you mean it that way. I feel like you're trying to say this. We're emotionally mature. We're seeking understanding, the hidden emotions and feelings
but you can't
underneath it.
You can't use the sentence, I feel like, in a passive aggressive manner, because it'll be the same thing as accusatory statements. All right,
like, it is beneficial to agree to the no shame, no blame, no passive aggressiveness, those things that I listed before.
Yep. Like,
to have healthy conflict, to get to that connection, guys. Come on. 2025, we're practicing healthy conflict to reach a connection with people.
Start with yourself. If you want to get good at conflict resolution, start with yourself. Have an argument with yourself about one of the things that you want to change, that you feel guilty about, that you feel ashamed about, that makes you every time you think about it. And see what you can come up with. Try to be accountable to yourself. Answer yourself as if yourself is asking yourself the questions. Like, go through it all. Play both sides. And it's not so you can figure out the narrative of your partner. It's so you can get comfortable with what it's like to take accountability and what better thing.
How is yours different, Steph? How is yours different? It's just practice.
No, wait. Yeah, I want to know too.
We're practicing this. We don't all know how to have healthy conflict. Some of us had to learn how to have healthy conflict. I wasn't. I didn't understand boundaries.
Wait, but like, what is different? What is it that you're talking about that is different for you? Is it the conflict bit? Is it the accountability bit? Is it like...
True. Like, which part did we touch on that is different for you?
Yeah, that's another way.
Calling you out, putting the spotlight on you. We're waiting.
Anybody got Jeopardy music?
Do 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 do.
Anxious typing.
Oh my god. Now I'm making mistakes. Backspace, backspace, backspace.
Gosh damn these thumbs.
So my son specifically requested kind of this topic. I mean, he specifically requested a bit about dealing with your emotions, but he touched on conflict as well. So I ran with that, and we did touch on emotions. It is good to do that internal investigating.
Yep.
Challenging your own feelings. Is that really what I'm feeling? Why am I so angry? It's because of this, this, and this. And I don't know. It's because that made me feel like this. No. At the end of the day, I'm just a little embarrassed and hurt. And that came out as anger. Steph's not typing, so. She said she needs a hug. I guess we'll call you after this. Love you. But that ends our topic today. Our 7 steps. To quickly recap, because I closed it. 7 steps. Number 1, creating a space of appreciation and affection. Step 2, creating a safe place to be honest, but no criticism, blame, shame, yelling, passive aggressiveness. Number 3, identifying actual feelings and needs. Number 4, learning how to express yourself with respectful vulnerability. And number 5, validating the other, even if you don't agree with their feelings. And 6 is boundaries, your standards and needs. And 7 is accountability.
But last but not least, remember, if you try to keep in the mindset of understanding the other person, you will get farther than if you try to make yourself heard. And I know it sounds backwards, especially when you're coming to somebody about something that you're having an issue with. But if you're having an issue with that person, then there's something that you're not understanding about them for the way that they are behaving. In turn, once you figure that out, you can then figure out, or they can figure out, why you are feeling
hurt feelings and unmet needs. And the goal is to feel seen and heard.
It's just, I'm going to drive it home one more time, guys. Like, I really mean that. Fight for that understanding. Like, I'm calling everybody out when I say this. It's 2025. It's time to grow up and be an emotionally mature adult. And in order to do that, that can't fall into the whole, how come somebody else doesn't do it for me? How come I always have to be the one? I mean, it falls back in that repetition of being the oldest child and me being stuck doing the dishes while my brothers never had to do them. And I was always, how come? And it does nothing for you. It does nothing for you, guys. Like, that mindset does nothing for you but take your energy. So, perspective switch. I'm excited to understand this person. I'm excited to engage so that we can find understanding. I can't wait for him or her to be able to know what it is that I'm actually feeling and thinking. Be excited for your conflict, and it will go easier. That feels good. All right, I got it.
2025 is the year that we all grow, we bloom, put it into action. Guys, let's do this. I love it. All right, thanks for showing up for our late Wednesday evening. And next week, we'll see if we're at a 7 o'clock time or not.
Au revoir. More than likely, because I will be out in Nye for one more week for work.
All right, so probably another 7 o'clock night next Wednesday. Tune in. Thanks for being here.
Bye.